June 22nd, 2016. Tomorrow is going to be the vote as to whether or not Britain will leave the European Union. And, of course, this has global consequences, not only directly in Europe. And, of course, the European Union could start to unravel. And that would be, I think, a very good thing, because the European Union is now trying to consolidate with the essentially the North American Union. It's always economic consolidation first, and then closely followed by political consolidation. People in Europe have had enough of it. People across Europe have had enough of it. So they're starting to break out of that confinement. So we're going to be talking to Lord Monckton, because the referendum is tomorrow and all eyes are on Britain. Today, as we just before we went on air, we had Donald Trump start to essentially define Hillary Clinton. And so we're going to have a lot of breakdown of that speech. We've got an article that's up on the Drudge Report from InfoWars. Trump says Hillary makes millions from anti-gay, anti-woman regimes and wants Sharia migrants. And we're going to break down what that looks like for you in Saudi Arabia. Now, Hillary says she's a woman. Vote for her because she's a woman. Vote for her because she's going to do things for women. And yet she takes all of this money from these oppressive regimes throughout the Middle East, like Saudi Arabia. We're going to share a story with you about what the women in Saudi Arabia do on bumper car night. You won't believe this, how desperate they are to have a little bit of freedom and independence, to get the burqa off, to be able to drive a car. They're not interested in bumping into each other. They just want to be able to drive a car a little bit, have a little bit of freedom. So we're going to share that with you. Meanwhile, today, Hillary Clinton is in North Carolina. You know, we constantly hear about how Donald Trump is just poison for the GOP. He hurts the GOP so much. Really? You know, he brought in record numbers of voters this last election. Of course, Hillary's vote totals crashed from 8 years ago when she last ran for president. Hillary is being shunned in North Carolina by the top of the ticket of the Democrat Party. She's going to be talking in Raleigh today, and yet the candidate for governor is not going to be there. The candidate for Senate is not going to be there. What does that tell you about that important swing state? North Carolina is one of the swing states that is a must-win. There's a lot of reliable states that are going to go for the GOP, a lot of reliable states that are going to go for the Democrats. North Carolina is one of the states that is in swing, and the Democrats there do not want to be associated with her. It would be very bad timing, especially today, the way Donald Trump came out against Hillary Clinton. And as I pointed out, we're going to break that down a great deal for you. Also, Bill O'Reilly, you missed this yesterday, he's calling for gun registration. Here's an article from the Independent Sentinel. Bill O'Reilly wants assault weapons banned. He wants gun registered the same way that we register cars. He's also naive enough to think no one really wants to disarm Americans. And they point out, you know, we've been targeted by the IRS. Why would we want to create yet another thing where we're registered? Now, I have to say, you know, you always use, isn't it interesting? When we had Obamacare, they said, well, we got mandatory insurance for cars. Now they're saying we had mandatory registration for cars. We have all kinds of arbitrary regulations for cars that infringe on our freedom to travel. So why can't we infringe on the rest of our freedoms? That's why I say, you know, all of our rights hang together, or we lose all of our rights at the same time. And I think it's time that we not only reject this idea that we're going to enact controls because we've already put them on our transportation. I think we need to start liberating freedom of movement within this country. I think we need to start looking at things that we have given up that are fundamental rights, the rights to move about freely, the rights to travel. And I think we need to stop making those privileges. But of course, Bill O'Reilly and the people who want big government always use cars and airports as the template for how they're going to take more of our freedoms. And they also point out in this that Hillary is now talking about not assault rifles, but assault pistols. What does that mean? You know, an assault rifle is not defined. Even the liberal papers admit that. It's simply something that they want to make you afraid about. Stay with us when we come back. Alex Jones is going to join us from the road and give us his perspective. We'll be right back.
People talk a lot about being awake, but what does that really mean? The entire modern political system, the entire modern media system is about putting you into a controlled paradigm of limited information. And all of the major markers show that IQs are dropping. Cognitive ability is imploding. People are becoming more and more ignorant, more and more shuttered, more and more on a psychological and spiritual reservation. To be free, I'm not saying you have to believe what Alex Jones believes. I'm simply saying you have to get outside that controlled reservation of globalist social engineering and think for yourself and realize there's a wider universe of mystery and majesty all around us. And that as long as we stand for individual freedom, as long as we stand for the individual to be able to try to live out their own destiny, we are brothers and sisters no matter what color we are or what region of the world we come from. That truly unifies us. The globalists are trying to create an artificial construct where they unify us around the idea of a central control system where we don't criticize anybody or we don't have any basic free will, and we take the central directives from a planned economy, a planned computer-driven system to decide what jobs we have or where we go to school or where we travel or what we have for dinner. They're selling collectivism as the idea of giving up our individuality. That's counterfeit collectivism. True collectivism in the human sense is totally individual and totally independent and absolutely democratic. Democracies in a mass sense are very dangerous. You can get 51% to vote to make the other 49% slaves. That's why in a republic, basic liberties of all, including the minority, are protected. But in a democracy of the free market, where you vote for the music you like by what you listen to and what you support, where you vote for the food you like by what you buy and what you promote, where you vote for the education you like by where you send your children or where you go for secondary education. That is the true diversity. That is the true unifier. And we've seen in the last few weeks tragic Islamic attacks in Europe and the Middle East and also here in the United States on lesbians and gays and others. And it's really been a big wake-up call for these people that believe the state cares about them to understand that this state and other states have brought in these radical Islamics because they're more compatible with what the globalists want to build than an open, free society. And to see gun shops all over the United States, like right here in Texas, in Houston, offering people free shooting lessons and free training, reaching out to them and saying, gun owners don't hate you. Gun owners, on average, aren't bigots. Gun owners want you as a human to be able to protect yourself and even the odds when some monstrous killer comes in to take your lives and others. That's what it's all about. That's why guns are this great equalizer. It's why the establishment pushes to take guns from the general population, because they want to be the only ones with the guns. And I know that's incredibly simple, but it's true. Every other nation on earth, except for a few like Switzerland, have taken the guns from their people, and they're all moving steadily into corruption, into authoritarianism. The few nations that haven't taken the guns, like Switzerland, have the lowest crime rates in the world, the highest standards of living, because they're truly citizens. They're truly trusted by the state. The people are the state, and so they are empowered. They have choices. They have great freedom. They have lower taxes because, ladies and gentlemen, they are the state. We need a small state because we need to have the manifestation of our individual will through a collective be minimized, because historically it's so incredibly dangerous. But that's because that's collectivism centralized and focused like a laser. It can be destructive. But when true individually expressed collectivism, these are my own views, but everyone sees them as evident of truth because they're universal, they're obvious truth, prima facie. When individuals make choices, that is the crowdsourcing of common sense, and that is the ultimate in the expression of free will by individuals, but in a collective spectrum that truly brings us the Renaissance and the huge palette of choices we have today. Let's continue to discuss the nature of the world and how to truly break the matrix and become free. And again, I don't have all the answers, my friends. I simply understand basic universal truths throughout time immemorial that have empowered and unleashed the true potential of humanity.
Okay, and that's Alex Jones on the road, and he's going to be joining us with a special report at the bottom of the hour as well. Now, the top stories that are breaking today are the major speech by Donald Trump defining Hillary, and we have a report from the road about Hillary for prison. Actually, Slate magazine wrote a story about a person at the Donald Trump rally in Las Vegas on Saturday and spent a great deal of time talking about her Hillary for prison T-shirt. And that was the title of the article. We're going to tell you about that, but also We're going to have Lord Monckton joining us in the second hour. We're going to be talking about Brexit. All eyes internationally are on Brexit. Look, you have to understand, the election that we have here in America with Donald Trump, as well as Brexit, they're all about the same issue. We just had the first female mayor of Rome elected. And a lot of people focus on the fact in the mainstream media, oh, the first female mayor of Rome. No, the real story is that she's a populist mayor, that she is against the consolidation of power into the EU. Now, they can't portray her as a far-right extremist because she's not. She's a lefty environmentalist. And so they many of them don't even want to talk about her politics. They just talk about the fact that she's female. But it's very important because that is another example of how people across the political spectrum want to take back control of their lives locally instead of surrendering it to a distant bureaucracy. So we're going to be talking to Lord Monckton about what's going on in Brexit because it affects all of us. There is a globalist consolidation that's going on, a consolidation of power. And the question is Britain going to remain a nation, or is it going to be subsumed into this collective globalist Borg? And the same thing is true of America. Is America going to remain a nation, or are we going to lose our sovereignty? Because that's what's going to happen if the Trans-Pacific, transatlantic partnerships happen. Our trade, our economy is going to be managed by a committee that we have absolutely no control over. There's no election of this committee. And they can rewrite the terms of that agreement, which will rewrite the terms of our economy at will. Senator Sessions, who many of us believe, I hope that Donald Trump will pick him as vice president, has laid that out. He says it's a living document. You don't know what this thing is going to become once you've passed it. But let's take a look real quickly at some of the first snippets of what Donald Trump was saying about Hillary Clinton today. We have an article that's up on the Drudge Report. Kit Daniels, Trump says Hillary takes millions from anti-gay, anti-woman regimes, and she wants Sharia migrants. He points out Hillary Clinton takes millions of dollars from these regimes in the Middle East. He says, I only want to admit people who share our values, who love our people. But Hillary Clinton wants to bring in people who believe women should be enslaved and that gays should be put to death. He says the government of Brunei also stands to be one of the biggest beneficiaries of Hillary's Trans-Pacific Partnership, which she would absolutely approve if given the chance. Absolutely. That's why the establishment and both parties support Hillary. This election is about the consolidation of globalist power. And she is the one who will give it to them. Donald Trump is the one who stands in their way, just like Brexit. That's why we've got all of the corporations, all the political establishment. Obama was in Britain stumping against Brexit to keep them in the European Union. Trump says Hillary Clinton took up to $25 million from Saudi Arabia, where being gay is also punishable by death. They bragged that they gave her 20% of what she took in. Now, take a look at this Wall Street Journal article, for example. This is an article about Saudi Arabian women who love to ride bumper cars. Now, they don't do it because they get a kick out of bumping each other. They do it because they're so desperate for a little taste of freedom. Look at that picture. Two women in a burqa sitting in a bumper car. And that's the only time they can get behind the wheel in that oppressive regime. Do you think they got a bumper sticker on that bumper car that says, I'm for Hillary, I'm with her? I don't think so. I don't think so. Bumper burqas, I guess you could call the ride. I don't know. But you know what? Donald Trump had a great line in his speech. Look at that picture, that illustration. That is priceless. A woman in a burqa. That's a Wall Street Journal, typical kind of a woodcut illustration with a woman in a burqa sitting in a bumper car. You know, her slogan, I'm with her. Donald Trump says, you know what? I'm with you. I support you. I'm not asking you to get behind me and make me an emperor, okay? Like Hillary Clinton is. Now listen to what happens in Saudi Arabia. This is important. Here's a woman, they're talking about how she drove in circles, and when the cars came in her direction, she swerved. These were electric bumper cars, but in Saudi Arabia, the ride doesn't always live up to its name. She says, I come here to drive. She's a 27-year-old homemaker. She's still giddy from the roughly 5-minute, mostly crash-free ride in her red and green two-seater. She says it's much better than bumping against others. This is at a weekly ladies' night only, where women can discard their headscarves and their head-to-toe black gowns to reveal the latest fashion trends, ripped jeans, tank tops, tossed to the side, 80s style hair. Now, there's no men at all in the park on this night. all the women are